"Your Highness, he's here again." The guard's voice quivered in the grand silver hall. The echo of boots followed, firm, unhurried, human. Princess Liora didn't even look up from her crystal goblet. "Does he still believe a human can serve in the royal guard?" she asked, her tone like polished frost. The guard hesitated. "He insists on proving himself." "Again?" Leora's lips curved into a cold smile. "Then let him try. Perhaps this time he'll learn where he belongs." And the heavy doors opened. He walked in. Ethan, the human soldier. Dust clung to his worn boots, and his uniform was plain compared to the gleaming armor of the elven court. Yet his eyes, gray as stormlight, held something the hall had never seen: unbroken resolve. When he knelt, the hall fell into silence. "I've come to serve," Ethan said quietly, "not to beg." A ripple of laughter moved through the nobles. Liora rose from her seat, her silver hair glinting beneath the chandelier. "Serve?" she repeated mockingly. "A human among the royal guard? You can't even sense mana, can you? What will you guard us with, your bare hands?" Ethan met her gaze. "If I must." Her laughter faded, caught between disbelief and intrigue. The audacity in his calmness unsettled her, and that unsettled feeling quickly turned to disdain. "Very well," she said, stepping down the dais. "You want to prove yourself human?" "Survive one night beyond the crystal gate alone." Gasps filled the chamber. Even the guards looked uneasy. Beyond the gate lay the forest of Dreth, where the air shimmered with ancient magic and beasts devoured those unmarked by elven blessings. Ethan didn't flinch. "One night," he said. "I'll return by dawn." Leora's eyes gleamed. "If you do, I'll let you clean the stables." A fitting start for someone so brave. He bowed, silent, and left through the hall's cold archway. As the great doors shut behind him, thunder rolled in the distance. The nobles whispered about the foolishness of men, about how he would never see the sunrise again. But Queen Liora, seated quietly beside the throne, said nothing. Her eyes followed the human's fading silhouette through the storm, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soft but sharp enough to chill the room. "Liora," she said, "do you mock courage because it threatens your comfort?" The princess froze. Her mother rarely questioned her in public. Yet tonight something in the queen's tone carried weight, a warning or perhaps a secret. Liora tried to laugh it off. "He's reckless, Mother. A human who doesn't know his place." Lyra's gaze did not waver. "Sometimes," she murmured, "those who have no place are the ones the world was waiting for." The storm outside deepened. Lightning flared across the stained glass windows, casting fractured light on the throne room, shards of gold, silver, and shadow dancing across Leora's face. For the first time, a sliver of unease cut through her pride. She turned away, gripping her goblet a little too tightly. By dawn, she whispered to herself, "He'll be gone. Humans always break." But far beyond the palace walls, in the dark, whispering forest of Dreth, Ethan lit a single torch, and the flame refused to die, even as the rain began to fall. The forest stirred, eyes glimmered between the trees, and the night itself seemed to lean closer, curious, because for the first time in centuries, a human had entered the forbidden realm, not as prey, but as a challenge, and something ancient had taken notice. "Do you hear it breathing?" Ethan whispered to himself as the torchlight flickered in the rain. The forest of Dreth wasn't silent, it listened. Every rustle, every drip of water, every faint pulse of magic felt aware, like the trees themselves leaned closer to inspect the stranger who dared walk beneath them. His boots sank into soft moss, and the air shimmered faintly blue, traces of mana too dense for any human to breathe for long. But Ethan moved steadily, his hand on the hilt of his worn sword, his eyes fixed forward. Back in the Silver Palace, the princess couldn't sleep. Liora stood by her balcony, rain kissing her pale hands. She watched lightning crawl across the mountains and told herself she wasn't thinking about him. "He's probably already gone," she muttered. But the words rang hollow. The memory of his eyes, steady, defiant, lingered like a spark that refused to die. Humans were supposed to cower before elves, yet he hadn't, not even once. That quiet strength had unsettled something in her, something she didn't understand. And her mother's words, "Those who have no place are the ones the world was waiting for," refused to fade. Down below, In the grand chamber, Queen Liora sat alone before a candle. In her hand, she held an ancient scroll bound by human script. The ink shimmered faintly, alive with old enchantments. After all these years, she whispered, another one has come. Far away, Ethan pressed deeper into the forest. The rain softened, replaced by a whispering wind. He caught sight of ruins, ancient pillars wrapped in roots. Etched with glowing sigils he couldn't read. Then he heard it, a low growl, too close. From the shadows stepped a creature shaped of mist and bone, its eyes burning green, a wraith beast. It towered over him, translucent and ghostly, its breath like frost. Ethan didn't run. He exhaled once, steady. You're not real, he said quietly. But when the beast lunged, the ground trembled. He rolled aside, barely dodging the strike. His torch flew from his hand, extinguishing against the mud. Only his sword remained, useless steel against something not truly alive. Then something strange happened. His sword glowed faintly blue, not bright, but steady, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. The glow deepened and the beast hesitated, its ethereal body flickering. Ethan didn't understand why, but he moved with instinct. He charged, striking through the chest of mist. The blade passed through like smoke, yet the creature screamed, a haunting, echoing wail, and shattered into light. Silence returned. Only rain and breathing remained. He fell to his knees, gripping his sword, confused and trembling. The glow faded. But one thing was certain. The forest had seen him. It had tested him, and let him live. When dawn's first light broke, Ethan stood at the crystal gate, drenched, exhausted, but alive. The guards who opened the gate stepped back in disbelief. He survived, one whispered. By the time Liora entered the throne hall that morning, word had already spread. Nobles murmured in disbelief. Others stared, pale and silent, as the human stood at the center, mud-stained, eyes calm, sword at his side. Liora's voice cracked slightly when she spoke. You actually returned, Ethan bowed. As promised, her pride wavered. For the first time, she couldn't find words sharp enough to hide her awe. Queen Liora rose from her throne. The forest does not allow the unworthy to return, she said softly. You have been seen by the old spirits, Ethan of Earth. Ethan looked up. I only wanted to prove I could stand. And you did, the queen replied. Which means the prophecy may yet live. The hall fell silent. Even Liora turned to her mother, eyes wide. Prophecy? She whispered. Elira's gaze shifted between them both, human and princess, her tone quiet, almost reverent. Yes, she said. The one that foretold a human's courage would decide the fate of our realm. And before anyone could breathe, the palace lights flickered, as if the very air trembled at what had just been spoken. The prophecy had awakened. Do you think he truly survived the forest, Mother? Liora asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Queen Elira didn't answer immediately. She stood beside the balcony, looking over the palace gardens where morning mist clung to every leaf. He did more than survive, Liora. He endured what centuries of our warriors could not. The words stung. Pride battled curiosity inside the young princess. She had mocked him, laughed at him, yet somehow the human's presence had left an imprint she could not erase. When Ethan entered the throne room later that day, silence swept the hall. Mud still clung to his boots, his sword at his side, but there was no hint of fear in his posture. The nobles murmured, casting glances that mingled disbelief and fear. Liora stepped forward, eyes cold. You claim victory over the forest, she said, her voice sharp. And yet you are human. You should not have returned. Tell me, how? Ethan met her gaze evenly. The forest tests courage, not birthright. Gasps escaped the hall. The elves had always believed that only those of noble lineage could command courage enough to survive Dreth. Yet here stood a human, defying centuries of tradition. Liora's hands trembled slightly, though she clenched them behind her back. Do you know what you risked? I do, Ethan replied, calm. And I accepted it. For proof, and for a chance to serve. The queen stepped forward, her silver robes brushing the marble floor. You misunderstand, Liora, she said gently. This human may hold the key to our survival. Something ancient stirs, and courage alone may not suffice. Strength is not enough, but hearts that refuse to yield. That is rare. Liora's laughter was bitter. So you praise him, Mother? A human who barely understands our ways? Queen Illyra's gaze hardened. I praise what survives, the rest will fall. A tense silence filled the chamber. Then the doors behind Ethan opened again, revealing a council of elder elves, their robes flowing like shadows. Each face was etched with worry, and in their hands were scrolls and relics that hummed faintly with power. The prophecy, one of them said gravely, speaks of a time when our people will face an enemy unseen. Only one not bound by our blood may stand as a bridge. That human, he is part of it. Liora's heart pounded. A bridge? What does that mean? The queen's eyes softened, yet there was an unspoken weight behind her words. It means, Liora, that the human's fate is intertwined with ours, and soon you will understand why the forest did not take him. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the princess. I do not wish to lead. I only wish to serve. But even as he spoke, the air trembled. Shadows deepened around the room, and the faint sound of a distant horn rolled over the mountains. A warning carried by wind and rain. The elder's eyes widened. The first movement has begun, one whispered. Liora's hands fell to her sides. Her mockery, her pride, they felt fragile now, meaningless against the weight of what had been hinted at. Ethan stepped forward, though he did not speak. His presence alone radiated calm determination, a quiet strength the princess had never seen in any elf. Queen Illyra studied the pair, human and princess, standing in the grand chamber. Soon, she said softly, you will both learn that courage wears many faces. One will bend with wisdom. The other will learn that strength alone is not enough. Liora's eyes narrowed. For the first time, doubt crept into her thoughts. The human she had mocked might be the only one capable of facing what was coming. Lightning flared outside, illuminating the marble floors and throwing their shadows tall and distorted. The room seemed to shift with every pulse of light, as though the palace itself waited for what was to come. Ethan knelt again, not in submission, but as a silent promise. A vow that he would stand no matter the challenge, no matter the cost, and the princess, for the first time, felt the stirrings of humility. The clock of destiny had begun to tick, and in the distance the first storm of the coming battle whispered, carrying with it shadows that would challenge the courage of all. Why did the human survive the forest? Liora whispered as she walked through the palace corridors, her silver gown brushing the marble floor. Her footsteps echoed, a soft, haunting rhythm that seemed to answer nothing. Queen Illyra followed quietly, her eyes distant, as though she were watching events unfold far beyond the palace walls. Because he carries something you do not see, she said. The princess stopped abruptly. I've mocked him for weeks, mother. I've laughed at his courage, his ignorance of our ways, and yet he walks among us like he belongs. Illyra's gaze softened, though it held an unyielding edge. Belonging is not given. It is earned. And sometimes it is inherited from destiny, not blood. You will see soon enough. The moonlight garden lay ahead, hidden behind a veil of enchanted ivy. Few dared enter it, for its magic was ancient and wild, capable of revealing truths that some were not ready to face. Yet tonight the queen led her daughter through the gate, the silver moon casting fractured patterns across the cobblestone path. Ethan was there, kneeling beside a fountain whose waters shimmered under the moon. His sword lay across the marble edge, and he appeared calm, as if he had known the garden all his life. Princess, he said softly, looking up. The queen asked me to wait. Liora's lips parted in surprise, though she quickly masked it with a sharp edge. I did not request this, she said, though her voice carried a faint tremor. The queen smiled faintly. No, you did not. But perhaps it is time you witness something beyond your understanding. The water of the fountain rippled, and then, as if answering some silent command, images appeared within its surface. Scenes of battles long past, of heroes who had walked before both human and elf, and of an enemy cloaked in shadow, whose power could tear kingdoms apart. Liora gasped. She saw warriors falter, lands burning, and yet a single human figure moving through the chaos, unbroken, resolute, standing where all else had fallen. Who is he? Liora asked, her voice barely audible. The one the prophecy speaks of, the queen replied. He is not ordinary. Courage flows in him like a river. Unbound by fear or lineage, humans have always been underestimated, Liora. But sometimes those we deem weak are the ones who hold the key. Ethan rose, his gray eyes reflecting the moonlight. I do not seek glory, he said quietly. I only seek to protect. The water rippled again, revealing shadows moving toward the palace, twisted shapes that even the elders had not fully comprehended. They are coming, Liora whispered, fear flickering in her heart. Yes, Liora said. Soon you will see that mockery can turn to regret if the heart is not humble. Courage alone cannot stop what approaches. Wisdom, trust, and unity are required. That is why he survived and why you must learn to stand alongside him, not above him. The princess felt a strange pull in her chest. For the first time, she saw the human not as a subject of ridicule, but as someone whose resolve could challenge destiny itself. A sudden gust of wind blew through the garden, scattering petals like silver sparks. Ethan extended a hand toward the fountain, and the images dissolved, leaving only their reflections in the still water. Liora caught her own reflection beside his. She did not step back. Instead, she stared, recognizing something she had not admitted before: respect, curiosity, and an uneasy admiration. Perhaps I underestimated you, she said softly, almost to herself. Ethan's lips curved slightly. Perhaps you did. But there is no time for doubts, princess. Soon the world will demand action, and we must be ready. The moonlight flickered as though nodding in agreement. Shadows from the garden lengthened, reaching toward the walls of the palace like fingers of warning. For the first time, Liora felt the weight of reality pressing down. The human she had mocked was not a man to be laughed at. He was a force the kingdom might desperately need. And deep within, a quiet seed of humility and resolve began to grow. The storm on the horizon was not just of rain and wind. It was the beginning of a challenge that could either destroy them or forge them into something far stronger than either had imagined. The human's courage. It unnerves me, whispered Elder Kale, his voice low and strained as he scanned the palace courtyard. Moonlight glinted off his silver staff, but his hands trembled. It is not their place to walk among us, yet here he stands. Unbroken, Queen Elira's gaze remained steady, unwavering. Courage cannot be contained by birthright, Kale. Sometimes it comes from the least expected. The palace was quiet, yet attention had settled like mist. The storm from the distant mountains approached, not with the soft rumble of thunder, but with a palpable, suffocating presence. Shadows seemed to cling to the edges of the walls, reaching like long fingers. Inside the grand hall, Princess Liora paced. Her silver hair shimmered in the dim candlelight, each step echoing like a warning. Mother, I feel it, she said, her voice tight with unease. Something watches us. Something beyond the forest, beyond the mountains. I cannot ignore it. Elira's eyes narrowed, studying her daughter. Then perhaps it is time for the truth, she said. There are forces gathering that we have not faced in centuries. Beings that hunger not for land or treasure, but for the essence of life itself. They can sense fear, hesitation, and laughter only delays the inevitable. Liora froze, the weight of her own previous mockery settling like a stone in her chest. Ethan had survived the forest not by magic or elven skill, but by courage that refused to falter. And now, as the shadow of threat loomed, she realized that she had been underestimating more than the human. She had been underestimating herself. Ethan entered the hall then, quiet, deliberate, carrying no weapons beyond his sword. His eyes met Liora's, calm and steady. I've sensed them too, he said. They are closer than any of us imagined. The forest was only the beginning. I felt their hunger even beyond the trees. The princess's heart pounded. Then what do we do? She asked, her voice faltering despite the steel she tried to summon. Ethan knelt, not in submission but in preparation. We prepare together. Queen Elira stepped forward, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. And you will not do this alone, human, not now. The kingdom's strength is in unity, not arrogance. A sudden chill swept through the hall and candles flickered violently. A distant howl echoed through the mountains, a sound that carried with it an unnatural weight. Even the elders, usually unshakable, glanced toward one another with grim faces. Liora's voice trembled. Mother, if they reach the palace, if they breach the walls, they will find us ready, Elira interrupted, her voice firm. The human's courage is the first spark, but you, Liora, must learn to temper your pride with resolve. Only then can we withstand what comes. Ethan rose, looking toward the horizon where storm clouds mingled with shadows. We don't have much time, he said. They will move at nightfall. The palace defenses are strong, but Raw courage and strategy are required. I've trained in human ways unknown to elves. We can use that edge. The princess clenched her fists. The thought of working alongside him, trusting someone she had mocked for so long, felt unnatural. Yet beneath that resistance, a strange exhilaration stirred. He had faced death in the forest without hesitation. Could she rise to the same standard? Lightning split the sky outside, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. In that light, Liora saw Ethan not as a human soldier, but as a symbol of endurance and audacity. The forest had tested him, and now the storm of the coming night would test them all. She drew a steadying breath. "Then we prepare. Together," she said, meeting his eyes. Her voice carried not mockery, but determination. Ethan inclined his head, a faint smile crossing his lips. Together. Queen Liora observed them silently, her expression unreadable. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the mountains and clouds, a presence stirred, ancient, patient, and hungry. The kingdom's fate had shifted. And in the echo of distant thunder, only one truth remained clear. The coming night would decide who was truly worthy to stand against darkness. The first stars appeared, pale against the bruised sky as the palace prepared for the coming threat. Liora stood atop the northern wall, silver hair whipping around her face in the cold wind. Her eyes scanned the horizon, alert to every movement, every shadow that dared approach. Beside her, Ethan adjusted his grip on his sword. Mud and sweat had dried into the leather of his gloves, but his posture remained unwavering, a pillar of calm in the rising storm. "They'll move soon," he said quietly. "The longer they wait, the stronger they grow." Leora's heart thumped, but she forced herself to steady her breath. "We've never faced anything like them," she admitted. "Not in our history, not in the legends." Ethan's gray eyes met hers. "Then we face them together. Legends are written by those who refuse to fall, not by those who tremble at shadows." Lightning split the sky, revealing shapes moving among the distant hills. Twisted forms, clawed and tall, slipping silently toward the palace. Their eyes glimmered with an unnatural hunger, and an oppressive cold followed in their wake. The guards shivered, clutching their weapons, but many were paralyzed with fear. From the inner courtyard, Queen Alira's voice rang out, commanding yet calm. "Stand firm. Trust in what you know, and in what you do not. Courage must guide your actions tonight." The gates rattled. The first wave had arrived. Shadows pressed against the stone walls like living smoke, claws scraping marble, teeth gleaming under the pale moonlight. Ethan moved swiftly, positioning himself between the intruders and the younger guards. Each swing of his sword was precise, practiced, yet something more than skill seemed to guide him. He anticipated the enemy's movements before they struck, his human instincts sharper than the elves had imagined. Liora watched, awe and fear mingling in her chest. She had mocked him, laughed at the idea of a human standing against such horrors, and yet here he was, proving that courage could defy expectation. A monstrous figure lunged at the walls, and the princess barely ducked in time. Her heart raced. "We can't hold them forever," she shouted to Ethan, her voice cracking with urgency. He glanced at her, calm and unshaken. "We will hold them, Liora, but you must trust your instincts." "Not mine." Her eyes widened. She had always relied on others, servants, guards, magic, to protect her. Now the choice was hers alone. The enemy pressed harder, claws tearing at stone and armor alike. Fire from the palace ballistae lit the night, illuminating the silhouettes of the shadow beings. Their screeches were deafening, a mixture of rage and hunger. Leora's hand tightened on her bow. She released an arrow, and it struck true, finding a vulnerable spot in a shadowy figure. A scream echoed, and the creature vanished into mist. Ethan's sword met another wave of attackers. Each strike sang through the night, a rhythm of defiance against the impossible. Even the veteran guards paused, watching him, learning from the human who had survived the forest and now led them through the first storm of the siege. The moonlight flickered across the walls, casting long shadows that danced with every swing of swords and spark of arrows. Liora realized something that had never occurred to her before. The human did not just fight for survival. He fought for purpose, for the chance to protect, and that courage ignited something deep inside her. Queen Liora stood beside her daughter, silent but attentive. She knew the storm of darkness was only the beginning, but in Ethan she had found the spark that could rally the kingdom against the rising tide. Hours passed. The enemy battered the walls, relentless and cruel, yet the palace held. Every arrow, every strike, every act of bravery carved a line of hope across the night. Finally, as dawn's first light crept over the mountains, the shadows began to retreat, drawn back into the forests and hills from which they came. Exhausted, injured but alive, the defenders of the palace stood victorious. For now. Liora approached Ethan, mud streaked across her gown, hair disheveled, eyes wide with awe and respect. "You," she began, voice trembling. "You were incredible." Ethan nodded, brushing rain and grime from his sword. "We were incredible," he corrected. "All of us." The queen watched quietly, a faint smile playing on her lips. Something ancient had been tested and found worthy tonight. And in the silence that followed the retreat, Liora finally understood. Courage could not be mocked. It demanded respect, and sometimes even a princess must kneel before it. The palace was quiet now, save for the soft drip of rain from the shattered battlements and the low murmur of exhausted guards tending to their wounds. Smoke from scorched stone spiraled lazily into the morning sky, mixing with the pale light of dawn. Princess Liora walked among the remnants of the night's siege, her steps careful, reflective. Every shattered banner, every dented gatepost told a story of courage she had once thought beneath a human. And yet here he was, Ethan, standing calm and unshaken amid the chaos, his gray eyes scanning the horizon as if predicting the next storm. "You're alive," she said softly. Approaching him, Ethan turned, the faintest smile on his face. "I told you I would return," he replied quietly. There was no boast in his voice, only a quiet strength that seemed to radiate calm over the destruction around them. For a moment, Liora struggled with her pride. She remembered the first day he had knelt in the throne room, the laughter that had bubbled from her lips, the cold mockery she had wielded like a shield. And now, that same shield felt fragile, almost meaningless. Queen Liora appeared then, moving down the steps from the palace, her robes streaked with ash, but her posture unwavering. She placed a hand on Leora's shoulder. "It is time, daughter," she said softly, yet with authority. "Do you understand why the forest, the shadows, and the storm did not break him?" Liora lowered her gaze. She did now. Courage was not born of magic, nor of privilege, nor of lineage. It came from the heart, from the refusal to yield in the face of impossibility. And tonight, Ethan had shown that humanity, often dismissed, held depth she had never imagined. The queen's eyes met Leora's, sharp yet gentle. "Kneel," Leora's breath caught. Not in fear, but in the weight of understanding. Kneeling was not submission to the man, but recognition of truth. Recognition that courage, humility, and resilience were not bound by birthright. She stepped forward slowly, knees pressing against the cold marble, and lowered herself before Ethan. Ethan's eyes widened, startled, but he did not move. "Princess," he began. "Do not speak," Queen Liora interrupted gently. "This is her lesson, not yours, and yet it is your courage that taught it." Leora's eyes rose to meet his. For the first time she saw him not as a human beneath her, but as an equal in strength, in resolve, in heart. "I mocked you," she said quietly. "I doubted you, but I see now. Courage does not ask for recognition. It simply endures." Ethan knelt slightly in return, not as a gesture of superiority, but of respect. "Then we are equals," he said simply. The queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "Now you understand, my daughter. The future does not belong to those who claim it by right alone. It belongs to those who stand when all else falls." The courtyard was silent but for the soft wind, carrying away the smoke, carrying with it the lesson etched in the hearts of all who had witnessed the siege. Shadows had receded, but the memory of bravery lingered, a living mark of humanity and elf standing side by side. Liora rose slowly, her pride tempered with humility, her heart aligned with courage she had once derided. She turned toward Ethan fully, her gaze steady. "We have much to prepare for," she said, "and you will lead, not because I mock, but because I trust." He nodded, the faintest light of dawn glinting off his sword. "Together," he said. And in that moment the palace, scarred but unbroken, felt alive with promise. For the first time in centuries, a human and an elf, princess and soldier, had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. Their bond forged in fire, storm, and courage. Queen Liora watched quietly, knowing that the world outside was still filled with shadows, but inside the walls of the Silver Palace, a lesson had been written that would echo for generations. Humility is earned, courage is timeless, and even the smallest spark of heart can ignite a kingdom. Princess Liora straightened, and with a newfound grace, she whispered, "Rise, Ethan. Together, we stand." And the human rose. The kingdom watched, and humanity, once mocked, was honored.